In this video, we will be going through a game that I played against a 2020 rated opponent, and I will teach you how to think during your games so you can also start playing better chess. In this game, I played the Scandinavian defense, which is by far my favorite opening to play against pawn to e4. This game was a bit of a surprise, the move that the opponent played. They played pawn to h3 right here in the opening, which is quite confusing. So I always recommend all of my students, my coaching students as well, my subscribers as well, to try out Scandinavian. It has a bit of a bad reputation, but I think it's a very good opening if you know what you are doing, which is an important side note. Usually, white plays knight to c3 and attacks the queen, which always leads me to retreat the queen to d8. And then from there, I have a very simple setup that I can play with bishop out, pawn c6 and e6, develop the knight, develop the bishop, develop the knight, and castle. A very simple setup that you can always play. But sometimes when you play Scandinavian, your opponent will play a strange move very early in the game, which could be this, pawn to h3. Sometimes I also see pawn to d4, or I see knight to f3. Basically a move that doesn't attack the queen, like it's not knight c3. And this is the moment where most Scandinavian players completely go wrong, because the worst thing that you can do here is stick to your normal variation and continue with your setup with e6 and c6, and no, that's not what we do here. Against every strange variation, you should try to castle long as quickly as you possibly can, which is totally different from the usual lines, but very important to know, because I will show you an amazing attack that I was able to set up in this game with a brilliant move, and it's a very common attack in this position. All right. The opponent plays knight to f3, and this pawn that they put on h3 is actually useful because it does stop us from playing bishop to g4, which means we have to play bishop to f5 instead. There is one thing that I wanted to have a quick chat about here first. Against all of these stranger variations, it's also very good to look into playing the move e5. The move e5 is also very important and a very good move. I didn't play it in this game because I tried to set up something else, but it's always a good possibility. For example, here as well, I castle long, but at any point you can also always play e5. e5 is great because it puts a pawn in the center, also helps attack that d4 square, which is actually now attacked a total of 4 times already, which makes it hard for white to ever play pawn to d4. Instead, I developed knight to f6, also a very normal move to play. The opponent plays d3, and I play pawn to e6. Again, I think you could also play pawn to e5. It would work just as well here. Probably maybe even a little bit better, I have to say. Okay. Finally, the knight comes out to c3, but this is not a problem because we can just retreat the queen. And this is somewhat the basic setup that you should try to keep in mind for when you play this. The pawn can be on e6 or e5, depends a little bit on the exact setup. I was actually in my mind playing through my theory that I use when white plays d4 very early. So maybe I should have been more focused in this game on playing e5, because if it's possible, it's the best move. If it's not possible, it's just e6 that we play. And then we get this position. And from here, we will always have a huge attacking opportunity against the opponent's king, which is the main focus in this video. So white plays bishop to e3. I saw that, of course, this attacks the pawn. Sometimes there can be problems there if the knight goes to b5, and you have to watch out what's going on in that case. So I just immediately played pawn to a6 to prevent them from going there with the knight, and also to move that pawn so it's no longer under attack by the bishop. And then they castle short. And this is really where the game begins and where things got very, very interesting. So we have an opposite side castling position, and what we want to do here is we want to attack ruthlessly. every move that we play should be to try to set up some type of attack against the king. That is the general rule for opposite side castling, but it is especially true here, which is why immediately I started with the move pawn to h5. There are multiple ways to attack here. You can also try to play pawn to g5, sometimes supported by the rook, supported by another pawn, but I like going with pawn to h5 first. All right, and the opponent plays bishop to g5. This pins the knight. We don't want his knight to be pinned, so I instantly unpin this. We can have any trades here, doesn't really matter. All trades would be good for us, because if there are ever trades in the position, we would eventually be getting an open file for the rook. This would always be nice, especially combined with that bishop. White didn't trade, instead they pushed the pawn. And this is really where we need to go all out with the attack. Whenever you are attacking, the main priority is to try to activate as many of your pieces close to the enemy king. Like right here, I didn't yet see the solution. I didn't see how I was going to win or how I was going to attack, but I just knew that as long as I bring my pieces forward, closer to their position, eventually there should be something there. There should be an attack. This move is actually a very nice move because the knight is activated. Maybe there will be something on that h2 square in the future. That's always possible. Queen and knight teaming up. Plus this also attacks this light squared bishop. White decides to trade and we just take back, and all of this is fine. We are focused on the attack, and white is making a very, very typical mistake here. Whenever you are being attacked in chess, the best way to defend is to completely ignore what the opponent is doing and just start a counterattack. You can see that what white should really do is white should be looking into ways to try to counterattack here. For example, with b4, b5, and they should also try to open up the position. If you are being attacked, like white is being attacked, and you start pushing pawns where you are being attacked, you start trading pieces close to where you are being attacked, the more things that you move in the area where you are being attacked, the more weaknesses you will create. And this is really probably one of the most important lessons from this video. Don't start moving everything around when you are being attacked. Just look for a counterattack, because they are just making it worse for themselves. They are giving me quite some simple moves that I can use to attack their pieces, to chase them away, and basically immediately get an attack going here. All right, at this point, I was just thinking already that black is completely winning. I already knew here, even though the material is equal, that I was going to be able to defeat this 2020 rated player. Simply because they are not focusing on the counterattack. And I will very soon be able to play g5, try to open up the position, try to get rooks involved. And this is really what you need to think about when you are attacking. First off, activating pieces, which we already did. We have quite some pieces here close by. The second is that we want to remove the pawns in front of the king. That's our plan. I decided to take the knight here. Another move which would be very nice, which I didn't spot in the game, would be pawn to g5. But this makes a lot of sense, because pawn to g5, we are basically trying to eventually get into some type of position. Depends a little bit how they capture back, where we could either do this, or maybe we could play f5 and then later take on g5. I was actually looking into playing pawn to g5, but I just wanted to eliminate that knight first and see what happens before I make the move. And they take back with the knight. Now there are multiple things we can do. We can play pawn f5, we can play pawn g5. I think that would have also been a good move. Basically, we want to try to open up the position. The best move here is probably pawn to g5, because this is an unstoppable plan. White cannot prevent us from opening something up, because if they take, well, they are just opening up their position. We could take back with the pawn. We could still push. Pushing would actually also be good, so that we can take that with the queen. But I decided to go f5 first, and then the opponent played knight to g5. And this is the first moment where I felt like, Maybe I messed up my attack a little bit because this knight on g5 is a very well-placed piece. It's well protected, and it's not so easy anymore for me to open up the position because this pawn cannot move forward. This pawn can move forward, but it won't really do much. This pawn, yeah, is going to be blocked by the knight. So I think that g5 push early was very important. I was a bit disappointed that I somewhat misplayed the attack. Still, black is winning, but it could have been easier. And then this move completely surprised me. Again, what is white doing? They keep playing on the side where they are being attacked. Terrible plan, because by doing this, they just help me. They help me. This rook is open right now. This rook, which was completely locked in, is now open, which is great. Yes, they can play g3, but this is a good position for us. And this is really where the most genius moment of the game happens. So we are attacking, and everything that we play should be to try to open something up. All right. The main plan in these positions is to see if we can open up the H file. That's always the plan. And maybe infiltrate with like a queen and a rook, something like that would be the plan. Because of the way that I played it and the way that the pawns have been pushed, this knight is a very annoying piece, and this pawn on h4 is also a very strong pawn. This pawn is supported, and it's also supporting the knight. So we need to figure out a way forward in this position. And I was able to find the winning plan. We just need to open up the position. So I played rook to h5. My opponent activated one of their rooks. And here comes the brilliant move that opens everything up. Beautiful attacking move. Rook takes g5. Sacrificing the rook. And this is a sacrifice that I was able to make and was able to find with a lot of confidence as well, because this is just the key plan. We remove that knight. We will be able to remove that pawn. And even though, yes, we are temporarily down in material, there is just an open file that we can use with our two remaining attacking pieces here, attacking the king, trying to go for a checkmate. I calculated that, yes, there would be a little bit of counterplay. They can win a pawn, but really none of that matters here because we have so much counterplay. So there are many things that we could do. We could immediately try to go for something like rook h8, queen h5, checkmate. I decided to play this move first, knight to d4, which it's a great move, because this is basically adding an extra attacker here. We are attacking the rook, and let's say that the rook goes back, for example. There would also be potentially this fork here. There are better ways to win actually than this fork. This fork is not even the most optimal way forward, but this fork would be present in the position as well as a way to activate an extra piece. My opponent saw this coming, so they played this to prevent the fork, so that if I play it, they would just be grabbing that and basically sacrificing back the rook, and I wouldn't be able to win that. But the plan here for black is very simple. We just activate the pieces on the h file. Rook to h8. All right, they attack my knight, and the question is always in these positions, do we need to deal with this or do we have a stronger move? Because my knight is actually not important here. The important thing is that we have this checkmate threat going on, which is why I just played queen to h5. Because if my opponent takes this knight, well, that is just a very simple checkmate in one, and they lose. So they cannot take the knight. I knew that this was coming. I knew that they would play this move, rook to e8 check, basically to make my rook move so that I lose the checkmate, so that they can then capture the knight. But it doesn't solve any of their problems because the rook just goes back and we still have this devastating attack. However, I think my opponent did a great job in figuring out a way to survive the attack, because they are no longer being checkmated here. But I realized here that we have a very simple way to turn this into a winning endgame. And that is another key lesson here. Oftentimes when you are attacking, a lot of players try to force checkmate, or they try to force winning queen or something. And sometimes it's by doing that that you will lose. you also have to be willing to accept that maybe your attack won't work and it will just be an endgame, a winning endgame that you should go for. So here I calculated the line queen check, and they barely have any options. They basically have to go here, because if they go up, I would be going in with the rook. This allows me to pick up a pawn, and I knew from here that I would be picking up so many pawns that this would be a winning endgame. My opponent made it quite easy. They played a move queen e2. And this is really where a lot of people would try to continue. They would pick up this pawn or this pawn. They would continue playing. But we are already up material. And if we leave the queens on the board, you give your opponent a huge opportunity to counterattack. Maybe they will have a threefold repetition. Maybe you will lose a rook by a queen fork attacking king and rook. So I saw a very simple endgame here. Exchange the queens, check with the rook, and this is a winning endgame. Why? Well, we have 6 pawns versus 4 pawns, which means we have a 2-pawn lead, and their pawns are also quite messed up. They don't even really have any plans. They can try to win f5, doesn't work, the pawn protects it, and our rook is a very good piece here. You can see we will just be able to pick up some of these pawns. Here I realized that white was going to have some counterplay. I didn't end up taking the pawn. I could have, but I felt like this was not the most important pawn. The most important pawn to win is this one. This is really the one that is stopping us from promotion. And then I saw that, okay, yeah, maybe I should go after this one, try to win this pawn so I can promote. White cannot really stop this. Check, check. We attack this, and they have to play very defensively. Yes, they can still try to play just like this, but they will just also be losing all of their pawns, which is what happened in the game. They just lose all of their pawns. And then we still have a very simple position where we have 3 connected passed pawns. And this should be incredibly easy, but I still know that many of you would be able to mess this up. I get messages every day from people asking questions like how to win this. Well, all I wanted to do was exchange those rooks, because as soon as those rooks are off the board, we have 3 pawns running up the board. The opponent cannot stop this, and our king is also close enough to keep an eye on their promotion square. So this was, I think, one of the most beautiful endings. Rook to g8, basically saying to white, look, you don't have a single plan. Because if you take this pawn, we will trade rooks, and since I have 3 pawns running up the board, I always win this. If you don't take this, that means that you will never be able to do anything, and I still have 3 pawns running up the board. The opponent decided to just take, but this is losing because this is a pawn race, and I calculated that we will be first, and it's not even that we are first, we are also stopping them from pushing that pawn. So I think this is a very good example of how you can play attacking chess, specifically in this variation of the Scandinavian defense. Let me know if this type of video is helpful by leaving a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.